One of the biggest questions of any season is which teams can compete against Penn State. But it's not really a question that I have at this point in the year because Penn State has cemented themselves as the dominant team heading into 2023. But it has been a wild season full of ups and downs, unexpected wins and losses. So that's got me wondering. That's why I have top 10 wrestling questions that I need answered right now. Starting with number 1. Who is getting upset next? And I say next because there have been 6 guys who were ranked number 1 at the beginning of the season, but they took losses in the year. Talking about Colton Schultz, who lost to AJ Nevels at Cliff Keen, Las Vegas. Max Dean taking multiple losses within the same weekend. Cole Matthews took a loss at the NWCA All-Star Classic, and yes, some of these wins count, some of them don't. Some of these guys are still ranked number 1 somehow. I mean, Aaron Brooks even took a loss to Marcus Coleman and is still number 1. This is just how crazy this year is. And my follow-up question to that is, were those upset wins just flukes, or are these guys actual competitors? You see, at this point in the year, I'm convinced that Paniro Johnson is a strong, worthy competitor at 149 with his win over Austin Gomez, even though he does have that loss to Yanni. And Michael Beard, who beat out Max Dean this year, has already All-American before, so yeah, he's a competitor. But what about guys like AJ Nevels, who he beat out Colton Schultz, but was it just the fact that Colton Schultz was a bit injured? And could Tanner Cook's win over Carson Harshela also just have been due to a looming injury that he was dealing with? There are a lot of wins like this that I'm not sure about, that only the rest of the season can really show us whether these were flukes or awesome wins from earlier in the year. And my next question is Yanni a shoo-in at 149? At the beginning of the year, I thought there was no chance Yanni, the Greek Freak, was going to lose this year. He was going to win his 4th title, but he's shown some chinks in the armor, or at least guys like Austin Gomez and even Paniro Johnson have showed that out of Yanni. In this 149 pounds weight class has been absolutely bonkers. Austin Gomez of Wisconsin beat out Yanni Diakomahalis, who beat out Paniro Johnson, but don't forget that Paniro beat out Max Murin, Shane Van Ness, and Austin Gomez. Then you look at a Colin Robrito of Northern Iowa, who beat out Caleb Henson of Virginia Tech, who has had a solid season, as well as Sammy Sasso of Ohio State, who has been kind of struggling a bit, but has been like a consistent guy at the weight at the very least. And then throw in other guys like Mizzou's Brock Mahler, Arizona State's Kyle Parko, Cal Poly's Dom Demas, the list goes on and on, John Milliner of App State. This weight class is far from over, but is Yanni that top dude? Because that's one thing we have to remember about Yanni is, yes, he does take lumps early in the season in even close matches, but by the time he gets to nationals, he is at peak Yanni performance. And my 4th question is about Stephen Buchanan. Will we see him actually wrestle this season? He transferred from Wyoming to Oklahoma in early December, and we still haven't heard yet whether he's going to be competing. I know those rules are very, very confusing. Will he be able to help out Oklahoma's lineup? And can he compete against those other top guys at 197 like Max Dean, Michael Beard, Nino Bonacorsi, and others at the weight? And of course, the biggest question is he even allowed to compete with that in-season transfer? And questions like this can be super frustrating. Perhaps you're looking for ways to navigate that recruiting process yourself. When can you transfer? When should you start talking to coaches and visiting campuses? What's up with NIL? And should you go D1, D2, D3, or somewhere else? And if you have legitimate questions like these, the best thing you can do is talk to an expert who has all the answers. Enter Teague Moore, former D1 head coach and national champion, who knew it was difficult for parents and wrestlers to navigate this recruiting process. So he started a wrestling consulting business. The great thing is he can help no matter where you are in the transfer or recruiting process. You can start your free introductory call with Teague today by going to thewrestlingconsultant.com or emailing him. The links to both are down in the description below. Thanks to The Wrestling Consultant for sponsoring this video. And that moves us to the next question, which is actually related to an earlier one. Which guys are actually injured? Now, I'm not insinuating anything, and I don't have any inside info about certain guys, but as a fan, I do wonder. For example, guys like North Carolina's Austin O'Connor, he hasn't really seen the mat much this year, so I'm hoping everything is okay. Similarly, at 157, Bryce Andonian of Virginia Tech hasn't wrestled this year, and I'm hoping that we're going to see him in the second half of the year. And heck, even Spencer Lee has wrestled here and there, but he still has those knee problems. And Colton Schultz and Carson Hartzler, both of them went down at the Cliff Key in Las Vegas and medically forfeited out, so I'm hoping they come back. Now, when guys sit out, it doesn't really bother me that much because they need to take that time to relax and heal up their body so that they are ready for March. But I do wonder, what does this mean for the rest of the season, and will we see more injury defaults like we always do at the Big Ten Championships? So let's move on to a team-related question, and that is, can Iowa State actually compete for an NCAA team title? Now, I don't think they're going to win the whole thing, but I think they could place in the top 5, which would be impressive. I know I thought Iowa State would be a good team at the beginning of the season, but I don't think anybody could have said, unless you're a Cyclones fan, that they would be this darn good. So far this year, they've already beat out Wisconsin and Cornell, and I'm sure the upsets are going to keep coming. They had that tight dual meet against Iowa, and man, was that a scary dual meet against Penn State, because while the score ended up 21-12, the dual meet was a lot closer than that. I think the reason they're going to be able to compete for an NCAA trophy is because of their tough individuals. Casey Swiderski at 141 has had an impressive year. Paniro Johnson has shocked us all as a freshman. Then you got David Carr at 165, who of course is a top guy at the weight. Marcus Coleman at 184, who upset the national champion Aaron Brooks. And Younger Bastida at 197 beat last year's national finalist Jacob Warner for the second time in his career. All of these guys have had wins that weren't just against like a top 25, top 15 guy. No, they were beating out like legit national finalists and national champions, showing that they can compete for the top of the podium if they are in peak shape in March. And the 7th question I have is about a Penn Stater. Can Bo Bartlett actually compete for a title at 141? As we know, Penn State's looking to repeat with 5 national champions this year, but a couple of their champs have already lost. Max Dean dropped a loss and Aaron Brooks dropped a loss. So far, Carter and RBY are the only ones holding strong. But even with all of them repeating, they still need somebody else. Could it be Greg Kirkfleet? Could it be Bo Bartlett? Now, Kirkfleet's looking strong as a top guy at heavyweight, the number 1 ranked guy right now, but Bo Bartlett is also a legit contender at 141. And the reason I say this is because this weight class is pretty open. Andrew Alvarez of Northern Colorado is a tough guy at this weight. Cole Matthews of Pitt has already dropped a loss. Real Woods has had some close matches, and Bo Bartlett is right there with all those guys. How crazy would it be if after wrestling up at 49 for the past couple of seasons, Bo Bartlett drops down finally to 141 now that Nick Lee's out of the way and wins a national title? That would be insane. And I know there's been a lot of talk about 149, but is 165 the toughest weight class? Now, at the beginning of the season, I thought it was going to be the toughest weight class with Shane Griffith, Keegan O'Toole, David Carr, Quincy Monday, but you still have guys like Cam Amin, Carson Hartzler, Dean Hamidi, Join Ramirez. This weight class has a lot of guys who have made names for themselves at one point or another in their career. But the other thing I'll say is those recent guys I just mentioned have all taken losses so far this year. The only guy who's really cemented himself as that number 1 guy is Keegan O'Toole. So I'm wondering if this weight class is going to be shaken up at NCAAs, or if Keegan is just that top dog that nobody's touching. And so that brings me to my penultimate question about a Big Ten team. How good is Maryland? Are they actually good? They started out this season with 5 straight wins, started out undefeated going into 2023. And they weren't just simple wins. There were wins against top teams like Navy and a top 20 ranked Pitt. This is the first time Maryland has started this season undefeated with this many wins in 10 seasons. And over those past 10 seasons, they've had some horrendous records. Now, I'm not trying to call them out, but their teams just haven't been that great. But that's why I'm so excited about them this season. But how good are they? Because with the Big Ten schedule in the second half of the year, we're really going to see how good they are. Now, I don't think they're going to be able to compete against Penn State or Iowa or Michigan or anything like that, but could they compete against a Rutgers or a Michigan State or an Illinois, even a Wisconsin? That's what I wonder about. And while I teased it at the beginning of this video, I am actually interested. Can the Iowa Hawkeyes compete against Penn State in a dual meet? Penn State is undefeated at this point in the season, and they've had some commanding victories with 5 near shutouts. I mean, they were just dominating teams. But don't forget, as I've already mentioned a couple times, they have had guys lose this year, and the Iowa Hawkeyes are going to come into State College swinging. You already know that Spencer Lee's coming out getting bonus points, and I think at 141 is going to be a real test between Bartlett and Real Woods. Going into 149, I mean, can Shane Van Ness pull an upset over Max Murin like Paniro Johnson did earlier in this season? And could this entire duel come down to heavyweight with Greg Kirkley versus Anthony Cassiope? Okay, I lied. I actually have one more bonus question for you, and that's, have you hit the subscribe button yet? Seriously. Hit subscribe if you love wrestling content and if you found any of these questions interesting.